We are learning Forest Conservation Act. Forest Conservation Act is the second flagship law that regulates the functioning of nodal ministry. India has got three prominent types of vegetation. One, tropical evergreen, two, tropical deciduous, and three, tropical thorny. Thorny do not count as forest. Deciduous and evergreen are forest. How we add the other two? They are the third dimension, altitudinal. So when I talk about the forest types in the country, I have got multiple variety, and the uniqueness that we have already understood that what is mangrove. Mangrove is considered to be a transitional biome between true terrestrial and true aquatic. But in India, when I calculate the forest cover, littorals are included. And that will get justified when we talk about forest conservation. This is the flowchart on which we closed down yesterday. What are the dimensions of forest conservation in India? So Forest Conservation Act 1980 was a revamped version of Indian Forest Act 1925. Forest Conservation Act 1980 marked up the beginning of compensatory afforestation. Compensatory afforestation was compensating the diversion of green for non-green purpose. I mean, if I have to induce development, I have to transfer the green belt to the non-green, airport development, roadways development, any other recreation space development, I need to divert. So regulating that diversion. So the first thing that you have to take to your stride is that when I talk about the diversion mechanism, so I just want to get onto this block here. Compensatory afforestation marked up its beginning from 1980s itself. But what is the compensatory afforestation for us today is since 2010. So 2010 compensatory afforestation marked up the establishment of National Champa Advisory Council and E-Green Watch. What exactly is the mechanism purview that you have to take into account? CAMPA stands for Compensatory Afforestation Management and Planning Authority. And E-Green Watch is electronic green watch, that is the control in the hand of National Champa Advisory Council to take care of compensatory afforestation. So National Champa Advisory Council have got responsibility one, collecting the compensatory afforestation funds, keeping it outside Consolidated Fund of India, in name of state Champa. So I create a hypothetical case. Odisha state government have diverted certain land area, the forested area, for the non-forestry purpose. So the user agency will pay. User agency will pay for not just the land, but also the provisioning services. Hand raise kar do, provisioning services yaad hai to. So the value of that land and the value of the provisioning services, user agency will pay. So I am a developer. I have got the right to divert green area in a given location in Odisha. I'll be paying for that diversion. What I'll be paying? Value of the land and the value of provisioning services. That money will be kept in control of National Champa Advisory Council in name of state government of Odisha outside Consolidated Fund of India. Role number 3, it will be reverted back to the concerned state government as annual fund. Responsibility number 4, it has to be monitored, evaluated, that the fund is only and only utilized for compensatory afforestation. National Champa Advisory Council have got this many responsibility. It will collect the fund, it will keep the fund in name of the concerned state government, will be keeping it outside Consolidated Fund of India, will be reverting it back to the concerned state government as annual fund, will be monitoring and evaluating that the concerned state Champa or environment department, because all states don't have Champas even today, are mobilizing that fund only for afforestation. And for that evaluation and monitoring, it has mobilized what we attempted yesterday, e-Green Watch. E-Green Watch is the tool in the hand of National Champa Advisory Council. And mind it, in doing all this responsibility, National Champa Advisory Council is entitled to spend not more than 5 to 10% of the total fund collected. Lower value. Money in a given year, if there is 100% of compensatory afforestation fund coming in, National Champa Advisory Council is not entitled to spend more than, less than 5, more than 10. Money, we are ensuring that 90 to 95% of the compensatory afforestation fund is going back to afforestation. Added factor that comes up with Champa's mechanism is protected areas are prohibited, but it doesn't seem to be practical, because sometimes we do have got compulsion to include protected area. So in this prohibited, what you have to understand is that user agency can divert. Aisa nahi hai that you cannot, but you can divert by two conditions: ready to pay 5 to 10 times net value and mandatory nod from Supreme Court of India. So it's a clear signal that 5% of the total area which is there as a protected area of the country, let us not think about diverting it. We have got 95% of area divert karo. Protected area, if it is compulsory for me to divert, then I have to pay 5 to 10 times the net worth of the land that I'll be diverting. It is economically suicidal. And then you have to take mandatory nod from Supreme Court of India. Have you understood it? And thus think about it. Starting from 2010, when Champa mechanism in this present purview have been mobilized, how much of infrastructure development has taken place in India? Roadways, railways, civil aviation, suburbanization, and etc., etc., etc. And since 2010, Indian green cover is on consistent increase. That justifies that Champa's mechanism is very successful. This is the functioning of Champa's, and you can have a question directly coming from it. So this is my column 1. Compensatory afforestation that marked up its beginning as Forest Conservation Act 1980. However, its more powerful, more defined mechanism of functioning is not before 2010. And this is how we take up the reference of column 1 of our study. Column 1 paves us to column 2. And what is the column 2 that we take into account? I've already given you synopsis yesterday. So social forestry I've removed. I'll just come back to it. Now, when I take reference of compensatory afforestation 1980, why there was the requirement of mobilizing national forest policy? I gave you some key terms. Please remind yourself. Compensatory afforestation was regulation and revenue. We attempted to change it to participation and conservation. So Forest Conservation Act was added with these two avenues. Forest conservation was regulate and revenue oriented. Let there be revenue generated for the compensatory afforestation. Let there be regulations as mobilized by the authorities. National forest policy integrated two new dimensions to the forest conservation: participation and conservation. Let us talk about participation first. When I take into reference participation, what exactly we are applying? Participation essentially goes with the mobilization of social forestry. Social forestry was initiated in India in 1976. It was basically the outcome of Stockholm Conference, United Nations Conference on Environment. When I take Stockholm Conference social forestry, it was basically with 5 Fs. What are 5 Fs? 1960s, India successfully mobilized Green Revolution. created the farming population self-sufficient in their food production. So we just wanted to ensure the 5 F's, that is fuel, fodder, fiber, food, and most important, fertilizer, that our farmers become self-sufficient in 5 F's. And these 5 F's, because even today, India continues to have a very strong dependency on firewood. We are still utilizing cow dung cakes as the sources of heating and cooking, which is one of the most wasteful, impoverished use, because we know that cow dung can be the life-saving support system in organic farming. So by ensuring that the farmers are producing their own wood for their own requirement, we are minimizing our pressure on forest and maximizing the use of animal excreta as biotic manure. Social forestry was mobilized. So 76 social forestry was essentially economic activity. We were more focusing on economic activity. And joint national forest policy marked up its utilization into afforestation. That social forestry of National Forest Policy, Joint Forest Management Guidelines since the 1990s is about participatory afforestation. Because we had the success of social forestry. So now you are cultivating to harvest, you cultivate to maintain. That kind of participatory social forestry in afforestation was mobilized. So social forestry was integrated under Joint Forest Management Guidelines. Today's social forestry is economic as well as ecological program. Social forestry by the people, tree-based farming, silvi-pasture culture, all that correlate very essentially to green regeneration. This is participation. And when it comes to conservation, you have got 2 domains which has been applied. So conservation part 1, I told you that already. It is IFMS. IFMS को बहुत ध्यान से याद रखना, बिल्कुल यूनिक है. It stands for intensification of forest management scheme. ये center sponsored program है. It actually goes up with 90:10 center sponsored बताया है in the special priority regions. Or otherwise it is 60:40 for rest of the country. And when I'm taking up special priority, I'm talking about 1988. So you have to just remind yourself that Jammu and Kashmir not bifurcated. So it is 3 + 8. You know what I have taken as special priority. What is 3 + 8 as special priority? Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, and 8 northeastern states. Can you recall 36 biodiversity hotspots area? Which were the 4 biodiversity hotspots area in India? Himalayas, Northeast, which is Indo-Burma. So automatically the biodiversity, endemism, forest diversity will be maximum there. If I have to protect my green, maximum benefit will come up when I'm protecting that area. So कौन से states हो गए जहां पर 90% resources coming from union government, 8 northeastern states and 3 northwestern Himalayan states. Now you can count 2 union territories and 2 states there. And for rest of the country, it is 60:40. So union government is sharing 60% resource, state government 40. What is IFMS and how it is different from the other forest conservation? It is not about increasing green from 24 to 25%. It is not about increasing quantity. It is quality control. And that is the reason invasive alien specimen control, sacred group protection, mobilization of control of forest fire are the important domain that is correlated with it. So conservation part A is going with IFMS, and conservation part B will go with Forest Policy Division. Forest Policy Division is basically an external arm of Forest conservation in the country. How do I apply the functioning of forest policy division? Forest policy division is a focal division for forestry. Now, this is an important term. International cooperation. So एक तो ये इंटरनेशनल है और एक ये फॉरेस्ट्री है. अभी थोड़ी देर में एक्सप्लेन कर रहे हैं. इंडिया इज मेंबर ऑफ यूएन फोरम ऑन फॉरेस्ट्री. These are the important examples that should be there in your list. Asia Pacific Forestry Commission. It is also the member of Committee on Forestry of Food and Agriculture Organization. Basically, till very recent times, forest and forestry have been always distinguished. Once you have written, you just give me go ahead, then I explain the things. You know, all these are the components of Indian forest conservation. And question can come up from any. What I want to do is, I just want to create an information here, and then I'll be just moving out. ध्यान से देखेंगे. Human activities. When I talk about human activities, it is basically categorized into 4 categories. Which are the types of activities we humans are engaged in? एक को बोलते हैं extractive. Extractive is basically when you are extracting something from nature. So extractive industry includes essentially which type of activity? Mining, है ना? Lumbering. When I'm lumbering from taiga forest, it is extractive. When I'm fishing from Dogger Bank, it is extractive. But अब थोड़ा सा इसको change करके सोचो. एक activity को बोलते हैं reproductive. Now reproductive activity is जहां पर आप nature के resources को utilize करके कुछ reproduce कर रहे हो. Reproductive industry is best defined with agriculture. और जब आप agriculture में wood production करोगे या agriculture में आपके paddy field में आपने fishes भी rear करे हैं और आप इन फिशेस को प्रोड्यूस कर रहे हो, तो ये वुड प्रोडक्शन और ये फिशेस प्रोडक्शन इस वुड प्रोडक्शन और इस फिशिंग से अलग हो गया, क्योंकि आपने फिशेस को हार्वेस्ट किया बाय रियरिंग देम, आपने वुड को हार्वेस्ट किया बाय कल्टीवेटिंग देम, नेचुरल डोमेन से तो नहीं किया. आर यू गेटिंग इट? सो व्हेन आई एम फिशिंग फ्रॉम नेचुरल फिशिंग ग्राउंड, इट इज एक्सट्रैक्टिव. But when I'm fishing from my artificially generated fish pond, it is reproductive. Give me hand raise. हमेशा से ये डिस्टिंक्शन हमने मेंटेन किया. जब हम कहते हैं फॉरेस्ट, so we say it is natural, and when I say forestry, we say it is cultivated by humans. It is wood based agriculture, या FAO कहता है tree based farming. Forestry have always been identified to be reproductive and forest is identified to be natural. समझ में आया? Forest policy division and FAO's wood based agriculture have terminated that difference, because today's social forestry is I want to regenerate the forest and maintain it, or I want to cultivate wood and harvest it. So आज की डेट में जब आप टर्म यूज करते हो ना फॉरेस्ट्री, तो बहुत मुश्किल है उसको ऐसे जज करना कि इट इज समथिंग दैट विल नॉट बी ओरिएंटेड टुवर्ड्स रीजनरेशन. इट कैन बी ओरिएंटेड टुवर्ड्स रीजनरेशन. So be very cautious in what we have utilized here. Forest Policy Division have marked up the mobilization of international cooperation to facilitate the understanding of what can be cultivated, where, for what purpose. You want to cultivate to harvest, do that. You want to cultivate to maintain, you do that. And this is where we are trying to generate out what is most conducive option with the participation and international cooperation. I'm on repetition mode, so kindly relax and remind yourself. Let the complete frame be there in front of us. Point 1 of Indian forest conservation, compensatory afforestation, National Champa Advisory Council, fund collected for diversion, reverted back, e-green watch to monitor and evaluate, protected areas can be diverted with strict conditions. Condition 1, mandatory nod from Supreme Court. Condition 2, user agency must be ready to pay 5 to 10 times of the net worth, that is the land value as well as the value of provisioning services. Clear signal. Try to avoid that 5% of area, you have 95% to divert. When I change over the Forest Conservation Act from 1980 to National Forest Policy 1988, I notice the change with 4. It's 4 pairs of terms that should be there in your mind. Indian forest conservation marked its change from regulatory to participatory. Participation, joint forest management guidelines, thus social forestry integrated. Social forestry integrated in mobilizing the grassroots people to a forest, regenerate the degraded forest. Second column done. The third thing that you have to take into account is that we converted our forest conservation from revenue oriented to conservation oriented. Let us not only focus on revenue getting generated. So when we say conservation oriented, we have added 2 pointers there. One is IFMS, for the first time India mobilizing quality control measure, and number 2, forest policy division, which bridged somewhere the gap between forest and forestry. IFMS is quality control, center sponsored. It's not about increasing quantity. It is about maintaining the quality, especially sacred groves, controlling forest fire. I think this is done. And when I get on to my column 3, part 1, I explained yesterday when we were at the closing down. So I just remove all this and get on here. And if I take reference of my column number 3 to be understood, so just let me just remove it. So conservation, participation, all taken into account, then what was happened? Participation was required to be converted as rights. So National Environment Policy, which talked about historical injustice, that we have been not just to the traditional forest dwellers in terms of their right on land and forest. It's high time that India should give recognition to the traditional forest dwellers in terms of their right. Forest Rights Act 2006 came into being. So Indian forest conservation added new feather to its list. So feather number 1, regulation, revenue. Feather number 2, participatory. Feather number 3, conservation. Feather number 4, rights. I hope it is comfortable. Conservation we divided into 2, IFMS and Forest Policy Division. Hand raise kar do jaldi se. And it was National Environment Policy, Forest Conservation, that marked up the beginning of feather number 5, MFF, Mangroves for Future. Mangroves for Future gives me many things that can be added. I've already given you the list that you can take into account. CRZ and ICMBAs are important domain for us to pick up. So let us try to quickly take the understanding of each one of them. Feather number 5, enlarged here. When I talk about MFF, the IUCN's initiative, recall we are aware of the fact that India roughly accounts for 4% of the global mangroves. Mangroves are identified to be the transitional biome between true land and true water. 7,516 kilometers of the entire shoreline of India, we have mangroves. However, when I talk about the prominent reference of the mangroves area in the country, and direct question can be asked, it is West Bengal, it is Gujarat, and it is Andaman and Nicobar Islands. West Bengal, I'm talking about Sundarbans without any doubt. And when I talk about Gujarat, it is Kutch and Khambat. Andaman Nicobar Islands, you know Andaman Nicobar as the Oceanic Islands. And it is West Bengal that is accounting for maximum. So almost half of Indian mangroves are going with Sundarbans, West Bengal. So we take the reference of mangroves protection very clearly coming up in reference to IUCN's initiative. And this is the constituent because India identifies mangroves to be the formal member of forest. When I talk about mangroves, there is automatically coastal regulation zone that comes into limelight. Coastal regulation zones are identified to be initiated in India in 2011. And coastal regulation zones incorporate, अब इसको कैसे याद करें? क्योंकि जब आप MFF की बात करते हो तो you are taking onshore and offshore littorals. तो onshore और offshore littorals को जज करने के लिए कैसे जज करेंगे बहुत ध्यान से देखना है. Understand it. I think this will be the easiest way for you to learn. CRZ notification identifies, and here goes my diagram, and that will give you the understanding very well. So I just want to create a frame, and this is my mean sea level. Since physical geography, we are been talking about it, so I don't think this should create any trouble for us. Okay? CRZ1, CRZ2, CRZ3, and I'll write it purposefully here, CRZ4. Okay? And now demarcating them. Labeling them. CRZ1, between high tidal level and low tidal level. CRZ2, 200 meters on shore. CRZ3, on shore. Needless to say, beyond 200 meters. You know shoreline, coastline. ये आपका shoreline हो गया ना? Hand raise कर दो. है ना? This is shoreline. आप ऑन शोर चले गए तो ऑन शोर में CRZ2 भी है और 3 भी है. अच्छा, CRZ4 क्या है? CRZ4 को कहते हैं एक्वाटिक एरिया, एंड एक्वाटिक एरिया बेसिकली कोरिलेट कहां तक करता है? 12 nautical miles from the baseline. So 12 nautical miles. 12 nautical miles टेरिटोरियल वाटर होता है. 1 nautical mile लगभग 2 किलोमीटर होता है. ठीक है? एक्वाटिक एरिया 12 nautical miles. आपने अगर NCERTs पढ़ी है तो इंडिया के लगभग सारे मैप, जितने भी मैप है NCERT में, उसमें लिखा होता है इंडियन टेरिटोरियल वाटर एक्सटेंड्स 12 nautical miles फ्रॉम अप्रोप्रिएट बेसलाइन. ये बेसिकली यूनाइटेड नेशंस कन्वेंशन ऑन लॉज ऑफ सीज का टेरिटोरियल वाटर है, ये इंडियन टेरिटरी. अच्छा, अब यहाँ पर ध्यान से देखते जाएंगे क्या ऐड कर रहे हैं, और इसके बाद आप हमें बताएंगे. आई नीड योर हेल्प टू प्रिसाइजली पिक अप द थिंग, सो बी वेरी कॉशियस एंड नोटिस इट. सो व्हाट आई हैव डन इज aquatic zone, fishing allowed. CRZ1 and 2, salt extraction allowed. CRZ1, no construction permitted. And CRZ3, every type of, whether it is rural land use or it is urban land use, all permitted. All permitted. Coastal areas are fragile setup. Coastal areas are the areas that are identified to be having its higher fragility, largely because of marine pollution. I'll make you understand that. Rising sea surface temperature, coastal hazard, and many more things. So India have mobilized coastal regulation zone. Notification can be taken from 2011, and it demarcates 4 CRZs. CRZ1 is intertidal zone. Mean sea level is mean of high and low tidal. So CRZ1 is mean sea level. CRZ2 is onshore till 200 meters, which will not, it is prohibited with any construction. It should be left natural. Beyond 200 meters is the CRZ3, where every type of activity is permitted, provided it is not a protected area for sure. And the aquatic area is 12 nautical miles. If you have taken it, please give me go ahead. अब मुझे बस अपने आप से बता दो, and I want the answer, so please try and answer it. As soon as I'm learning MFF, mangroves for future, and I want to take CRZ to my reference, can you tell me which are the domain of CRZ which will mark its application in MFF? CRZ1, CRZ2, CRZ3, CRZ4. कहाँ पर डालोगे जल्दी से बता दो, या कहाँ नहीं डालोगे? चलो ये ज्यादा आसान है. Which coastal regulation zone is unlikely to fall in MFF? Which coastal regulation zone is unlikely to fall in MFF? Come on, class. Very good, Rohit. CRZ3. CRZ3. CRZ2 तो अपने आप आएगा. क्या होगा CRZ2 में? Come on, class. Don't disappoint me. ये होगा ना कोकोनट पाम. ऑनशोर लिटोरल होगा. यस और नो? और जब CRZ1 करोगे तो आपने ले लिया मैनग्रूव्स या सुंदरी. आप बोलोगे एक्वाटिक जोन में क्यों जाएं? क्योंकि एक्वाटिक जोन में आपके पास कोरल्स हो सकते हैं. कोरल रीव्स. हैंड रेज कर दो. लेकर जा रहे हैं आपको कोरल रीव्स पर. Coral reefs provides additional habitat to mangroves, इसलिए aquatic area भी आएगा. आई बात समझ में? इसलिए जब CRZ नोटिफिकेशन लोगे तो सिर्फ CRZ3 को हटा दो अपने रेडार से. CRZ3 doesn't go very specifically when it comes on to the reference of aquatic domain, or we are not taking it up in the reference of the study that is related to mangroves for future. बाकी CRZ 1, 2, 3, 4 सबके साथ जाएगा. And can you all recall, coral reefs in India is identified with Lakshadweep and it is also identified with Andaman Nicobar Island. तो अभी थोड़ी देर पहले ही तो आपने लिखा ना कि mangroves is related to Andaman Nicobar Island as third prominent area, तो aquatic zone तो आ ही जाएगा. हैंड रेज कर दीजिए. Is coastal regulation zones sufficient for MFF? ना, coastal regulation के zone के साथ आपको ऐड करना पड़ेगा important coastal marine biodiversity areas. अब वो क्या है उसके बारे में बात कर लेते हैं. Important marine coastal biodiversity areas is identified to be those wildlife refuge which falls into the coastal domain. So भाई मेरे पूरे लैंड मास पर 7,516 किलोमीटर्स में मैनग्रोव्स तो हैं. तो कौन कौन से इंपॉर्टेंट कोस्टल मरीन बायोडाइवर्सिटी एरियाज होते हैं? अब उसको जज करने के लिए क्या करते हैं? आई जस्ट कम अप है. आई जस्ट रिमूव दिस ब्लॉक फ्रॉम हेयर. When I take account of ICMBAs, that is important coastal marine biodiversity areas, I'm essentially taking into account the mainland, which is largely involving more than 100 wildlife refuge. And these wildlife refuge, 22 are given priority, belonging to both west and east coast of India. 22 are given priority. और अच्छा, मुझे कोई नाम आपको बताने की जरूरत नहीं है. पेरियार, वेम्बनाड, yes all of us. ईस्ट में आ जाओ, गल्फ ऑफ मन्नार, पंबन. Getting it? Getting it? I have showed you the important marine biodiversity area. पुलिकट, कोलेरू, गहिरमथा, चिल्का, सुंदरबंस. हैंड रेस कर दो. पॉइंट क्या है? If I have to protect the coastal marine diversity area, will I not be protecting mangroves? Mangroves for future is integrated with ICNBAs. ICNBAs are important marine biodiversity areas. These are wildlife refuges that are marking their confinement in the coastal belt of the country. These coastal belts are protecting their important biotic diversity. Agar Koringa Wildlife Refuge hai, it is principally known for the new nesting site of olive ridley turtle. Will it not be protecting its mangrove? This is how it has been applied. And the last thing that has been added to it is ICZM. ICZM is Integrated Coastal Zone Management. And I just want to add it right here. When I talk about ICZM, it is actually the World Bank initiative. It is about participation of the coastal community. It is integrated with port-led development. Hai na? Coastal community in ensuring the biotic diversity, beaches, say pollution abatement, and many more things. So if I am mobilizing a particular port-led industrial development, engaging coastal community, fishermen, farmers, industrialists, to make sure that the things are controlled in a natural domain, is it not going to help us with mangroves as well? So this is how it's a pilot project that has been integrated and can easily be applied with the approach of MFF. And I'm on repetition mode, which are the 5 feathers of the Forest Conservation Act in India. Number 1, mangroves for future. It is combined with coastal regulation zones, ICMBAs and ICZM. Number 2, it is related to Forest Rights Act. Number 3, it is related to conservation involving IFMS and Forest Policy Division. Next, it involves participation with integration of social forestry since 1980 in the participatory afforestation development. Preceding that, it is compensatory afforestation because in name of environment, I cannot halt development, neither I can ignore environment while developing. This is Forest Conservation Act in India. If you have understood it, you'll give me go ahead. Minded, it is more than 20 pages of your forest report, which we have learned in a single consolidated manner. It cannot be made more easier than this. And have we been successful? Have we been successful in forest conservation of our country? Answer is yes. Before I come up to this page again, let me just make you understand with the important domain of Indian State of Forest report. Now, what you have to take into account as the study is, let me just open up the image. I think that will be a better thing for us to do. यहाँ से शुरू करते हैं. When I take reference of Indian State of Forest report, you can easily apply it with the category. So Indian Forest Survey of India, so FSI, needless to say, functioning under the nodal ministry, Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change, have been presenting the biennial report. अच्छा, ये भी एक important thing है, इसको याद कर लेना. Forest data updation in the country comes in the time gap of 2 years. Wildlife census comes in time gap of 5 years. And human census comes up in the time gap of 10 years. एक ये general frequency है हमारे country में. So Forest Survey of India comes up with a biennial report. And the biennial report की beginning जो है वो 1987 से शुरू हुई थी. And biennial report has been giving us the status of Indian forest. It is identified as Indian State of Forest report. And when I talk about the available data with us, it is 2021. So forest, and that is the reason 2021 हमारा 17th cycle report है. ठीक है? 17th cycle report में since 1987 we have been following our green cover into 3 categories. ठीक? ये कौन-कौन सी categories है? It is very dense forest, it is moderately dense forest, and it is open forest. When I say very dense forest, canopy density should be 70% plus. 40 से 70% होगा तो मॉडरेट होगा, और 40% से कम होगा तो ओपन फॉरेस्ट होगा, जिसमें लिटोरल इंक्लूडेड है। लिटोरल हमारे कंट्री में ओपन फॉरेस्ट का कंस्टिट्यूएंट है, हैंड रेस कर देना। एंड बेसिकली इट वाज फ्रॉम द 14th साइकिल। आपके पास डेटा 17th साइकिल का है, तो 14th साइकिल मतलब आप चले गए 2015 के रिपोर्ट में। सिंस 2015 a new category was added to the forest, that is trees outside forest. मतलब ग्रीन है लेकिन उसकी कैनोपी 10% से भी कम है, तो आप उसको फॉरेस्ट नहीं कह रहे, आप उसको ट्रीज आउटसाइड फॉरेस्ट कह रहे हैं। बात समझ में आई है? सो व्हेन आई एम कैलकुलेटिंग ग्रीन ऑफ इंडिया, आई एम कैलकुलेटिंग फॉरेस्ट एंड ट्रीज आउटसाइड फॉरेस्ट। एंड हाउ मेनी कैटेगरीज ऑफ फॉरेस्ट आर देयर? 3। और जैसे ही आप इनको कंबाइन करते हो तो जो आपको एक डेटा डिबेट मिलता है ना, वो समझ में आ जाता है। तो डेटा डिबेट क्या है आपके पास, इसको ध्यान से देखेंगे कि जब आप वो बात कर रहे हो कि आज की डेट में सम 24.5% ऑफ द टोटल एरिया इज अंडर फॉरेस्ट, तो ये जो 24.5%, 5-6% जो आपका टोटल फॉरेस्ट एरिया है, इसमें आपको मैक्सिमम डोमेन का जो डिमार्केशन है वो जा रहा है विद फॉरेस्ट कवर। अब इसको दिखा रहे हैं, ध्यान से देखना। ये क्लियर हुआ है? 4 कैटेगरीज। अब जरा इस इमेज को देखो, ये बताया आपको फॉरेस्ट कवर, ट्री कवर। बाइनियल ग्रोथ फॉरेस्ट कवर का कितना है, ध्यान से देखना, 0.22। ट्री कवर का कितना है? 0.76। ट्री कवर का मतलब क्या हो गया? आउटसाइड द फॉरेस्ट। और इन दोनों को कंबाइन करके जब आप 17th साइकिल की बात करते हो, then you take up into reference that Indian overall tree and forest cover is comprising 24.62% of the geographical area, and India targets it to be increased to 33.33%. So abhi bhi we are falling short, but we are having the increase in the green cover. I think you have understood it. अब इस डेटा टेबल को अपने दिमाग में रखकर 2 चीजें अप्लाई करो। If India has been the example of the country that has been immensely diverting its land area, how there is increase in green? This increase in green is justifying success of compensatory afforestation. But do remember, for the very first time, आज तक कभी भी नहीं, पहली बार यूनाइटेड नेशंस फ्रेमवर्क कन्वेंशन ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज, I'll make you understand it. यूनाइटेड नेशंस फ्रेमवर्क कन्वेंशन ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज ने पहली बार क्वेश्चन रेज किया है कि ये जो इंक्रीज दिखाया जा रहा है, दिस इंक्रीज इज नॉट मच रैशनल फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम। 2019 से 2021 के बीच में जो फॉरेस्ट कवर इंक्रीज शो किया गया है, यूएनएफसीसीसी ने पहली बार इसको चैलेंज किया है, बिकॉज इंडिया हैज टू सबमिट biennial update report under NAPCC, so we'll be learning it. इसके अलावा आपको एक डेटा फैक्ट याद रखना है, और वो डेटा फैक्ट याद रखने के लिए सिंपल ये वाला इमेज देख लो, ज्यादा कुछ डिमार्केशन नहीं करना। ये गेन एंड लॉस को याद, it is which states of our country that have marked up the immense increase. So top 5 gainers: आंध्र प्रदेश, तेलंगाना, उड़ीसा, कर्नाटक एंड झारखंड। लूजर्स को देखते हैं तो फेस वैल्यू को बड़ा डिसअपॉइंटिंग लगता है, अरुणाचल प्रदेश, मणिपुर, नागालैंड, मिजोरम एंड मेघालय। जब आप इनके डेक्लाइन को देखते हैं तो डेक्लाइन देख के ऐसा लगता है नॉर्थ ईस्ट में डेक्लाइन, इट्स समथिंग दैट वी शुड बी वरीड अबाउट। बट ये वरीड का रेफरेंस नहीं है, क्योंकि आपको जज करना पड़ेगा that these are the areas that are required to be induced with development now. बहुत delayed development mobilize हुआ है, तो diversion होगा, yes, no? Northeast is buffer for Indian Act East. Northeast has been mobilized with the Northeast Development Council, and there will be the diversion. So जो decline हमें दिख रहा है, that is something which is inevitable, and actually it has been very long awaited. extremely long awaited. So these losses are not that much to be worried about because we need to inject the development. So ये दो तीन चीजें आपको अपने दिमाग में रखनी चाहिए when it comes on to the state of forest report and the data. And why we have tried to understand the state of forest report and its data at the end, because we need to understand कि अगर इंडिया जैसी कंट्री अपने फॉरेस्ट कवर को इंक्रीज कर पा रही है, इसका मतलब है कि फॉरेस्ट कंजर्वेशन अप्रोच जो है वो फेवरेबल चल रहा है. बस इस इन ऑल फेवरेबल परव्यू वन थिंग दैट यू हैव टू कीप इन नोटिस इज फॉरेस्ट फायर. जो हमारा रिपोर्ट है वो कहता है 177% इंक्रीज इन फॉरेस्ट फायर इंसिडेंट्स हुआ है इंडिया में. जल्दी से बता देना क्लास, कौन सा प्रोविजन ऑफ फॉरेस्ट कंजर्वेशन यहां पर चैलेंजिंग एरिया पर आ जाएगा? कौन सा डायमेंशन, विच फेदर of the forest conservation comes up into the challenging avenue when I say forest fire continues to be the most important challenge in the forest conservation? Waiting for your answer. Which provision of forest conservation talks about forest fire control? IFMS. IFMS is oriented towards development of quality control. अगर पिछले 2 साल में हमारे 177% इंक्रीज इन फॉरेस्ट फायर केसेस हुए हैं, of course it is the example of important change of climate, but then it is giving me the understanding that IFMS को और ज्यादा टीथ देने की जरूरत है ताकि हम इस पॉइंट के परव्यू को कंट्रोल कर सकें. I think this is comfortable with us. Perfect. Before we go to our third flagship law, which will take us to CPCB pollution, which will take us to NAPCC climate change, I have to talk about one more conventional thing here. I'm going back to my board. So we are done with forest conservation.